So just a brief introduction. My name is Harmony. If you've attended some of the sessions, you've seen me before. I'm a customer education specialist here at MailerLite, so I help with the knowledge base articles, these webinar office hours, and some of our videos as well. So I'm just looking forward to talking about all the strategies for newsletters today and sharing some information. So just to go over what we'll be talking about today. So first, we'll go over some subject line strategies. Just talking about newsletters, we'll start with the beginning, which is subject lines. So how to improve open rates with better subject lines, as well as pre-header text. So we'll go over what all of this is and strategies to improve these things and things you can implement in your newsletters with your subject lines. Then we'll go into the actual newsletter itself and go into the content. So how to keep your readers hooked with good content, as well as just some basic design tips from deliverability to just some design best practices. And then at the end, we'll do some real examples and a live newsletter audit. So some of you submitted your newsletters for an audit for this session. So we're not going to be too brutal on that. I shared the newsletters with our email marketing specialist here at MailerLite, and her and I both went over them. And we just have some notes, some pros of what we saw that looked really good, and then some suggestions, just some ways to improve. So we'll go over some of those as well. Okay, so starting off with subject lines. Okay, so let's get right into it. Crafting subject lines that get opened. So when it comes to subject lines, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. You want to tease content in your subject lines and also pique interest and encourage subscribers to read more. But you don't necessarily want to be too vague. So here you see an example. It gives a tease of what the newsletter is, but it's not necessarily too vague, because also a subject line similar to this, where it is a little bit more vague or perhaps comes across more like sales, it could also be seen in a bit more of a spam way, or if there's a lot of emojis, things like that. Certain ways that subject lines are presented can look like spam, and this is one of the ways, by making them a little bit too vague or kind of in this style. So it's one of those situations where you do want to pique interest and give a little bit of a teaser what's in your newsletter without being too vague in that subject line in the beginning. Okay, and personalization. So personalization is something that I'm sure a lot of people know or have been using. If not, we're going to talk about it. So what personalization is inserting personal details from your subscribers. So here we have inserting your reader's name. Really, you can insert any information from your subscriber's name being the most common. So inserting your subscriber's name can happen in the subject line. You can do it also in the content of your newsletter. It's also good not to overdo that. And I also have here, be careful not to use names in every subject line. Too much will lessen the effect and the reader will start ignoring it. So it is good to use personalization, but you want to use it every now and then. And also you want to be aware of when you're using it in subject lines versus when you're using it in the content itself. So name being one of the more common ones that you can use just to get your subscribers' interest when they see it in their inbox. But you can also insert lots of different personalization, which we'll talk about. So in using personalization, you will use variables. So when you are sending newsletters in MailerLite, you're using variables like this. So for inserting your subscriber's name, you will use a variable like this. And what we mean by variable is you insert this into the area where you want the name to be. Okay, so if you've used personalization variables before, you're familiar with this. If not, there are different ways that you can use personalization variables. So this is for the subscriber's name. Now, keep in mind, if the subscriber doesn't have a name in their profile, that's why you want to use something like this, because some subscribers may not have their first name in the profile. Maybe when they signed up, they just put their email address, so you only have the email. So some subscribers, you might not have all of the information. And in that case, if you were to insert this name variable just by itself like this, as it's shown here, and that subscriber does not actually have a name in their profile, in that field, it will actually show up blank, okay? Unless you add a default value, which looks like this. So friend is just an example, But basically what this will do is it will replace the name value with the word friend, or that could be anything. It could be reader, whatever it is, if you want to do something that relates to your branding. Essentially, this is the format that you would use. So you would insert this variable where you have the name be. And again, if there's no name in their profile, then it will insert this other value that you have. And as I mentioned, of course, you can go beyond just names. So if you want to insert other personalization, perhaps like it's shown here, wedding dates or specific dates, specific, again, personalization that are specific to the subscriber in any sense. So you can use that by going in your MailerLite account. You will see this area under subscribers and under fields, and you will see all of the different custom fields and the fields that you have in MailerLite here. And you will also see the tags, as you can see here. So what these tags are, this is essentially your variable, your personalization variable. So when you are creating your subject lines or your content and you want to insert any of the information from your subscribers, these are the tags that you would use. So if you want to insert their email, for example, which you'll always have the subscribers' emails, this will always work. You can insert this tag here. And again, the standard layout for the default value will look like this. So essentially, at the start, you have the tag itself, which is this here. This would be the tag. Then you have the word default. And then the value is what gets inserted if the value is not there. So if the name is not there, it'll be friend. If the date is not there, it could be something else. So essentially, that's the tag, the word default, and then whatever value that you want to replace. So essentially, yes, most people know that we can insert our subscribers' names and we can get attention that way. We want to make sure that it is good to know that you don't want to overuse that. You want to use it sparingly. And also you can use this technique for any information that you have for your subscribers. So you just need to use the tags, and you can use custom fields as well. Keep in mind that a lot of these will be fields that are already there in MailerLite, but of course you can create more. You can see the create field here. And what that'll do is you can create your own custom field. So if you have information that you want to collect from subscribers that isn't there and you want to create those tags, that is how you will do it here. And essentially that will create a personalization tag for whatever information you want to collect if it's not already there in the default from MailerLite. So you can create custom fields as well. And I believe our panelists, yes. So if you check the chat, we have a guide on how to create custom fields as well. So a full guide on how to actually create these custom fields aside from the ones that are already there. Okay, so how about emojis in subject lines? Let's talk about how to use them, when it's best to use them, if you should use them, how to use emojis in subject lines. So a question, should you use emojis at all? And the thing is, it really depends. It's not a one rule for everyone. In some industries, emojis are a total hit. Research and testing have shown emojis can increase open and click-through rates, replace entire words, so it saves you space in those subject lines. You can communicate more with fewer characters. It also gives your brand personality. So again, it really depends. In some industries, yes. In certain cases, it's not always best to use emojis. So it really just depends on your industry and how you personally communicate with your subscribers. It is not bad to use emojis at all. It just depends on your audience, essentially. So while emojis can be good and they can help increase open rates as well as help to replace characters and things like that, there are other ways emojis can seem maybe unprofessional, or some industries where it may not be the best. So emojis can also make your message seem a little bit less serious and decrease your open rate if you miss the mark with your target audience. Again, it's that target audience, because I just said before that it helps increase open rates, and now I'm saying it can decrease open rates. Again, it depends on your audience and what they respond to and how you usually communicate with them, okay? So when your business deals with more serious or important matters, emojis can take away that professionalism from your message. It also can it also can hurt your campaign if you overuse emojis in subject lines, which can also trigger spam filters and harm your deliverability, okay, which is very important. So when you're using emojis, if you use emojis, you do want to use them sparingly. Using too much or using a lot of emojis can trigger those spam filters and make the email itself look like spam. So when it comes to emojis, again, just think about your audience, how you communicate with your audience, and if that kind of communication is something that is more playful and fun and personal, or if that communication is a bit more professional and you want to come across as, it's more of a serious or important message. Or it could just be that certain campaigns have that might be more serious than others. So it really just depends. So emojis are good when used sparingly and with certain audiences, but you don't want to overuse them. And you do want to keep in mind what your message is about and who you're speaking to. And if you're really not sure what your audience responds to, or you just want to check, you can try an A/B test. So A/B tests are great for lots of different things, for testing subject lines, for testing different content. I have an example. If you just want to add an emoji and change up the subject line a little bit, that's a great way to test it out. So you can have one version that maybe comes across maybe more of a professional sense, no emojis, just gives the straightforward idea of what the newsletter is. And then in the next test, you could have a more maybe playful, fun with emojis to tease the content a bit and see what actually gets higher open rates and what your audience responds to. So then you know what to go with, how to go forward with. So A/B testing is great for all kinds of testing, not just subject lines, but it is great for these little tests where you just want to see what your audience responds to, if they respond to more playful language, fun language, personal language, or if they respond to more professional language, or if we just want to test out different ideas for subject lines as well. And you can also use the subject line generator. So if you are on a premium plan with MailerLite, you can use our subject line generator. So if you want to just see different ideas, you can use this to generate ideas. So how the subject line generator works, this is AI that we have built into the platform. When you are creating your campaign and you are first creating your details, and you're creating the campaign name, creating the initial details, and you're creating that subject line. As mentioned, if you have a premium plan, you'll see the icon for the AI that will bring up this window here, and that can help you generate a subject line. So first, you can choose the tone, whether you want it to be natural, professional, playful, anything like that. And then the email description itself. So if it's a promotional newsletter, what type of newsletter it is. And then a little prompt to give the AI an idea of what your newsletter is about and what you're trying to communicate. And what that will do is it will generate several different subject lines that you can then insert into your campaign, so you can see the different ideas. If you want to just use this to generate ideas as well, then you can go ahead and edit what it comes out with. That's also a great way to use this feature, just to generate different ideas if you just want to see what it comes up with and see if it works into what you were already thinking. So if you have access to this, if you're on a premium plan, I highly recommend just playing around with it. Even if you already have an idea for your subject line, you already know what you want to say, I recommend just trying this and see if it comes up with something that is a little different, something that you like. Okay, and let's talk preheaders. So we've talked about the subject line, which is this first part that you'll see initially when the email lands in the inbox. And then you have the preheader, which is this little bit of text. Essentially, it's underneath or it's right after the subject line, depending on how the layout is in your inbox, but it's a little bit of text right after. So you can customize this, but if you do not customize this, this will essentially just be the beginning of your newsletter. So when you see that email land in the inbox and you see this little bit of text, if it's not customized, it'll just be the start of the newsletter. Okay, so we'll talk about how to customize that as well. Okay, So when it comes to email preheaders, you can actually use preheaders as a way to boost open rates, because this is also a bit of a teaser to your newsletter. So at this point, your subscriber has not actually opened your newsletter at all yet. They have just seen it in their inbox, and they've just seen the subject line, and they've seen this little bit of text that is the preheader. So you can use the preheader to communicate the most compelling benefit of the email. Give your readers a reason to open by highlighting the one thing that drove you to create the email in the first place. That's just one idea. So this is just something that you can use, a best practice to boost open rates, to just communicate the most compelling benefit of the email itself. So the reason that, like, the main benefit. So if it's a promotion, if it's just the main subject, I guess, of the email, to get them to open and to be interested in the rest of the content and to know more. You can also add a call to action as well. So here you can see, join now to collect stamps, get rewards. So you can also add a call to action. This is another way to pique interest. If you want to, if there's a specific call to action in your newsletter, if you're trying to get people to join a certain list or sign up for something, or to join an event, sign up for an event, anything like that, you're trying to get a specific action, a specific click, a specific link, things like that, you can actually add that into your pre-header. So give that call to action in the pre-header itself, which will also help to pique that interest and get more and boost those open rates. Another idea is to connect your subject line with your pre-header. So this is just a bit of a creative idea. If you want to kind of finish the subject line with the pre-header, it's maybe something a little bit different, something more creative. There's lots of different ways that you can use pre-headers, as you can see, from it's like piquing interest in a call to action kind of way, or teasing what's in the newsletter itself, or just something a little creative and different. Because the reason that you want your pre-headers to stand out, the reason that you want to pay attention to them at all, is because when you think about an email inbox and all of the different emails that come through, you want yours to stand out in any way possible. And really the ways to do that are the subject line and the pre-header. Those are the only things that the subscriber sees initially in their inbox. So in an inbox that's full of different emails, these are the main two things that you can edit and that you can personalize to make your newsletter stand out before it's even opened. Okay, so let's go into the newsletter itself. Let's talk about content. So we're going to talk about content when it comes to how you are communicating with your subscribers, as well as content when it comes to design. So just basic design tips from a deliverability standpoint to just some best practices when it comes to design. So this is, now we've opened the email and we're working on the content itself. Okay, so one tip when it comes to content is make it scannable. Before someone will invest their valuable time in your content, they might just scan the entire email to see what catches their eye. This is pretty common. I do this all the time. So you want to make it scannable. And how to do this is by using descriptive titles and bullet point lists to break up your key points into sections. So this allows people to know what your campaign is about within a few seconds. And then if they want to know more, or if something is more interesting to them, then they can read more about it, with the link to the site, something like that. But essentially, you do want to make something scannable, and you want to give those titles and those headers so that at a quick glance, someone can see what your newsletter is about and the main points that they want to scan through. So this is someone who is just going through their newsletters and wants to, they're interested in it, and they just want to see the basic points. So talking about basic points and the most important points, we'll talk about email content hierarchy, which is very important. We're also going to talk about this when we go over the email audit as well, because content hierarchy plays a part in any newsletter, any industry. It's a kind of a universal best practice. So email content hierarchy is the process of placing the most important messaging where the reader can find it quickly. So you want to start with the most important points that you want the reader to take away from the newsletter itself. So essentially, this is at the top of the newsletter. This is the opening. This is the introduction. This is the first call to action. The most important points essentially will be at the top or the most prominent in your newsletter. So you can do this in different ways. using color, contrast, position, and size to put more weight on those points, whether it's putting those points, like I mentioned, more at the top of your newsletter, or it's making those points bigger with more colorful design, or it's making the font more creative and different to catch attention. So you can use different techniques to create those eye-catching points, but it really is about making the most important messaging at the forefront of your newsletter. You can also, like I said, use fonts, so placing larger typography at the top, and then go smaller with less important info. So this is common best practice when you're creating those headings. Larger fonts larger fonts to communicate the most important points, and then a smaller font to go over the smaller info. I put less important. It's more just giving more detail to the important point. So I wouldn't even say less important, but it's just here's the main idea, and then here is more info about that main idea. So you always want to highlight that main point first. Okay, and quickly, we'll talk about responsive design, which MailerLite customers don't have to think about too much because all of our designs are responsive, but it is something to think about and consider. So because more than half of your audience is opening their emails on a mobile device, you always want to make sure that your email looks good on both a desktop and a mobile device. So like I mentioned, MailerLite designs are always responsive, so you can preview the newsletter on both mobile and desktop. So that doesn't necessarily mean that all of the content will always look the best on mobile. It just means that it will be responsive. So all the links will still work, the content will still be there, but it's still a really good idea to, when you're previewing your newsletter, when you're done creating the design, to see how it looks in both desktop and mobile, because you might find that while something looks a certain way in desktop, it may be shifted or look a bit off when someone's looking at it in their phone. And even if the content is there, the CTAs work, just the design might look a little bit off. And it really is more than half your audience. When you think about how many of us are on our phones, how many of us check important messages on our phones, we often see these campaigns on our mobile devices. So it really is good to optimize it and make sure that you're looking at how a newsletter looks both in desktop and in mobile. Okay, so talking about text and graphics when it comes to design and the relationship between the two, how to balance text and graphics. So you do want to balance your newsletters with text as well as a bit of images. So this concept is not necessarily for everyone. If you are used to communicating with your subscribers mainly, let's say through like a rich text where it's just a text, like it's just content, it's just text, no graphics. So this can depend on your audience as well, but most commonly recommended text to graphic ratio is 60-40 in favor of text. So you also want to consider using a maximum of 3 fonts. This is just a basic design practice just to keep your newsletter looking cohesive and not to make it look like too cluttered. Keeping with your branding, of course, if your brand has a certain font, a certain style, always keeping with that consistent layout. But typically, yes, you want to balance text and graphics. Graphics can also be videos. They can also be GIFs, however you say that. So it's not always essentially images, just anything it could be anything besides text as well. So it's always good to balance the two. Again, if you're used to communicating with your audience mainly through text, that is okay as well. But it is good to just balance, always throw in an image or two just to keep that balance, keep your newsletter looking cohesive in that way. Okay, next we are going to jump into the campaign audit. So we did receive several submissions. I believe we received about 12. I won't be going through all of them, but what I will do is I will show some of the newsletters that we received. And I'll go through some of the comments that myself and our email marketing expert went over. So you can see a lot of these tips, these best practices can be used in any newsletter. So if you submitted your newsletter, you'll get that personal feedback. But it's also good to just see what advice, what information can be useful in your own newsletters as well. So just give me one moment while I bring up some of the submissions that we received. One moment. Okay, one moment. I'm just pulling up. Okay, so hoping everyone can see this first initial newsletter that I'm sharing. Looks like everyone can, so that is good. Okay, so this is one of the newsletter submissions we received. Again, I don't want anyone to feel like we're gonna roast the newsletters or anything. It's not that. We're not going to be too critical. We're just going to go over some points that we think that both me and our email marketing expert thought were really great in this newsletter, and just a couple basic suggestions. Okay. So this is from Mary Rogers Web Content. That is the branding here. So I'll just show this newsletter that we received, just so you can see the basic design. So this is the entire newsletter. You can see some points broken down in bullet points here, which is really nice. And lastly, the footer with the links to share. Okay, so that is what the newsletter looks like. Thank you so much, Mary Rogers Web Content, for submitting your newsletter for this audit. So we'll go over some of the pros here. So this one had really great design. Both me and our email marketing expert, Georgia, both of us thought that this had really great design. The way that this design looks, both from a branding point, the images used, good font, good colors, it's easy to read. It doesn't look too cluttered, nothing is too overwhelming. I think the colors are nice. It's very readable. So from a design standpoint, it looks really nice, and it has a good mix of text and images. I think it probably fits that ratio I mentioned pretty much perfectly. You can see it is mostly more text heavy, but there is these nice images thrown in, and that kind of breaks up these sections, which is really nice. Also some good resources thrown in there, which is also a point that I put. So engaging copy with helpful resources and current news. So just noticing the theme of this newsletter, what it's about, it looks like it's about AI, it's about artificial intelligence and that topic. So I think that is, when it comes to AI, it's really good to have resources and current news, because AI is one of those topics that is always changing and there's always something new with it. So that is one thing I liked about this, is that it linked to a lot of current tools, and it showed that this person knows a lot about what they're writing about in this industry. So they've included, different ways that you can use AI. So some really good resources here. And also just different topics about AI. So not just, what it does or what it can do, but also here you can see Trevor Project. So there's different themes about this the specific topic. We have different sources here. As I mentioned, I do like how things are broken down in bullet points. Like I mentioned, keeping the newsletter scannable. This is a really good way to do that. So bullet points, holding these titles, and then if someone wants to know more, there's more of a description here. Okay. So really great newsletter overall. Some suggestions. So we both thought it would be good to focus on key topics a little bit more. So essentially, you could limit the number of topics covered in a single email to avoid overwhelming the reader. Consider splitting the content into separate emails if necessary. And I'm reading some of the notes that we made here. So this is very much a suggestion. We are not saying to split this newsletter in half or anything like that. It's more that if you could consider potentially splitting the newsletter content into separate emails. Another point is, if you do want to keep these emails a bit longer, you can incorporate something at the end that would be, or not the end, but something that says like, enjoying this issue, want to share with your friends, about halfway through the email instead of at the bottom. So you can encourage readers to share more. So that would be this here. So you can, when having the email a bit longer, you can essentially move this to about maybe halfway through, and put something like, enjoying the read, enjoying this issue, share with your friends. So you can appeal to those readers that do want to read longer form content. But essentially, you do have the opportunity here to split your newsletter if you wanted to. That is one idea. But overall, great newsletter. We will move on to the next one. Okay, I think everyone can see the next one here. I will also just comment that it was good. Everyone that submitted newsletters for this audit did have an authenticated domain. I did go through and check that. So that was one of the first things I checked when everyone sent their newsletters in, if the domain itself was authenticated and if the sender address was their own domain, so the brand's own domain, and if that domain was authenticated. So everyone that submitted their newsletters for this audit did have an authenticated domain, so there's nothing to comment there, which was really nice. Everyone had that first layer of deliverability checked out. Okay, so this is another newsletter we received. This is from Stellar Communications Houston. Thank you for submitting your newsletter for this audit. I appreciate everyone who submitted their newsletters for this. So I'll just go ahead and go through like this so you can see what it looks like. You can get kind of the basic idea of what it's about. Okay. And this is the footer. So I am looking at these in the browser, by the way. So I'm not looking at this in the email inbox itself. I'm looking at these in the browser, just so you are aware. Okay, so this is the newsletter we received from Stellar Communications. And pulling up some of the comments. Okay, so both of us, starting with the pros, both of us thought that this one had great copy and use of images. So just looking through, reading what you've written here and seeing the images, it's really nice. It feels very personal. I think this is nice, like it's a nice story. It feels like you're talking to your readers in a personal way, like friends. So I imagine that's how you communicate with your readers often. And I think that you capture that really well here in both the copy and the images itself. It's almost as if you're sending this to a friend or you're updating family on life, things like that. So starting off that way, I think is really nice, especially if your audience is used to that and they're used to communicating with you in that more personal way. This is a really nice way to start off with that. So I think the copy and the images work really well with that. So similar to what I was talking about before with just making a newsletter scannable, breaking up content, I see you've done that really well here. Well, you can do that with bullet points. You can also do it like this, just with these titles and these headers. So this is really nice. This is easy to read, simple layout. You have things broken down here. So overall, I think this looks really nice, and you do have a good ratio of image to text. This one is a little more text heavy, which is okay, but you do have it broken down with a few images here, which is nice. And I also, again, I do like the way that you write here, because I did go through and I read some of the personal anecdotes, and I think that the way that you've written is probably the best thing about this newsletter. It's engaging, it feels personal, and that's not just in the beginning, but I feel like throughout the email, it's even when you're talking about, more like different things like publishing, it's still that writing style does really come out. So I do commend you on that. I think overall, my favorite thing about this newsletter was the way that you wrote it and the writing style of it. Okay. I also like this this ending here, how you have the signature sign off with an image. I think this is just a nice a way to sign off a newsletter. So great job for all of that. These are overall, I think it's a really nice newsletter. A couple quick suggestions that me and Georgia wrote down here. So you can look to break up your sections either with different background colors or use our box content blocks for your pros and cons section. So essentially this is a design tip. So your design is really nice, but it is simple, and that's not a bad thing. It's just something that you can also improve a little bit if you wanted to. So for example, with these pros and cons, Georgia mentioned, you can use our box content blocks for the pros and cons section. So we have specific style blocks in MailerLite that could essentially make this section stand out a little bit more, or you could even make it, like 2 columns so that one is pros, one is cons. It's really just a layout and a design thing. It also does help make the newsletter more scannable. I also she mentioned here using different color? Yeah, background colors. So that's another way to break up the sections if you wanted to. So this is just the white background. Again, fine as it is. A suggestion is if you just wanted to use color blocks to break up some of these sections as well, or use our content blocks. I would just have a look at what we have in the content blocks in MailerLite with the drag and drop editor and just see if you can replace some of this text with those blocks. So essentially you're still conveying this information, but it makes it look nicer, and it's a nice design. It's also responsive in both desktop and mobile. So yeah, play around with those blocks. Let's see, what else? So she said this will also help to make your email feel shorter and more eye-catching to read. And also a comment about the links in red. Our email marketing expert, George, just said, just a quick note about the links in red. This can give off an error vibe, therefore can be less inviting. So try a different color. So so essentially red text can sometimes, it could be an error, or it can be, it's not the best color to use for links. Sometimes even spam filters can look at that. Sometimes they'll look at big red text in an email and what it says. And so even that can be a bit of a red flag as well for spam filters. So just suggesting, it could be a branding thing. I understand if you're using this color, but yeah, industry-wise, the red, it could be more. It could look like errors. It could trigger spam filters. So just a tip there. And that is it. Overall, really great newsletter. Thank you for submitting this one. I will move on to the next one. Okay, everyone can see the next one. This is our next newsletter submission from the brand is For Users' Sake, I believe is the brand. So thank you so much for submitting the newsletter for this audit. One thing I noticed with this newsletter initially, so when I was looking at the authenticated domains, I noticed that this one had a DMARC pass as well, which is good. That's a pro. It's an extra deliverability step. If you don't know about DMARC, we do have specific guides on DMARC. DMARC is not, it's not necessary for everyone, for every business, for every industry, for every audience. But depending on your reputation, I guess, for your domain, DMARC can really help your deliverability. So I recommend looking into that if you're very curious, but I did notice that this newsletter did have that extra layer of deliverability. So that is a good thing. Okay, let me just go ahead and go through the email so you can see. Okay, that is our newsletter. So visual appeal, one of the pros. This email has a clean professional design, high quality images. I would say absolutely. I think the images are really nice in this one, as well as the copy itself. This one does come across, this was a more professional email, so I like that. And I would say that this definitely conveys that from the images to the text itself. I like how you've broken up the sections, how you've added quotes. This is a really great way to break up sections in your email with text only. So without creating a different background color or without creating a lot of different content blocks, you can also just very simply do something like this, which I think is really creative, of just having a quote in a slightly italicized or different font with a little design like this. And that just helps to kind of break up that content, and it looks nice as well. So this is good for testimonies, anything that has a quote, a really great way to break up the newsletter like that. This newsletter also, as I mentioned, it is more professional, but it's also very informative. So there's good informative content here, including good industry insights, portfolio highlights, and educational resources. So I imagine that your audience is signed up for this campaign, this newsletter, for these resources. So this is a good way of just giving your audience what they signed up for and what they subscribed for. So all of the, resources about industry insights, portfolio highlights, educational resources, everything like that. I think that this is a great way to, as mentioned, give your subscribers what they signed up for. I feel like if I signed up for this newsletter, like wanting to see, like needing this information, it would all be here in a nice layout. I would have, the portfolio designs. It's all here in an easy layout. So I feel like our audience would be happy with receiving this newsletter. Also, good, clear CTAs too. I noticed that as well. Very easy, very scannable to read. If I want to specifically only find one thing in this newsletter, that is very simple to see with the clear CTAs and titles. Some quick suggestions. So this is at the end here. Georgia suggested include a signature and sign off your email, as the copy sounds quite personal, so it would help to know who's writing it. So that is one good suggestion. So she's saying that the copy itself, it does sound like a friend, like if someone's writing it, which is a good thing. So if you want to go with that branding, if you want to keep that tone of voice, you could add a signature sign off that is a bit more personalized. And again, with the personalization, if you do want to add personalization in the email, this seems like a good type of newsletter to add personalization to. So when I talk about those variables from the subscriber's name, but I feel like with this type of newsletter where you probably have a lot of information on your subscribers and what they're looking for in this education field, it would probably be a good idea to add more of that personalization in the newsletter itself. So I think that's just something to look about, to think about what you have, what kind of information you have on your subscribers and what you can add in this email, because I feel like this type of campaign, you're able to add more personalization to it. So that is one idea. Okay, we're going to go over one more before we wrap up. We did receive more newsletters. So if I don't go over your newsletter live in this audit, you'll still receive the audit and then all the notes that we took, because we did go through all the newsletters that we received and we have notes on every single one. So if we don't go over it in this session, you still will receive those notes by the end of the day if you haven't already. So we'll bring up the last newsletter here. So this is from the Traveler Style. Thank you for submitting this one. I will just go ahead and go through. This one's rather short. Okay, so this is a short one, which I like. This one has engaging copy, simple layout, clear CTAs. So that is essentially the first thing I noticed here. So the layout is simple, it's nice, the CTAs are clear, you can see exactly what you can click through to and what you'll land on when you click these links. I like the simple layout of this. It's also nice and good for deliverability, just having that simple layout, while also keeping it creative and looking nice. I like how it starts off with this quote. As I mentioned, having a quote, whether it's a testimony, a review, or even just a quote like this, where it's a quote that goes along with your newsletter or your branding, it's a nice way to just make the newsletter look a little different, add that little bit of creativity design without adding, different colors and making it, I guess, having the design be more colorful. You can use typography and fonts as a way to break up and add that creativity into your design. So I think that this is nice. While it is a simple newsletter, I like that you have these simple design elements that just make it, still make it yours, still make it your branding. I also put all the links function correctly, which is also something I did for all the newsletters. I just made sure that every link was working and that it led to what it said it was leading to, so that this led to the actual request form. This led to an actual, portal to schedule a call, everything like that. So if you're, putting these kinds of call to action where it's like schedule a call, then this link should lead exactly to that. So I did test all of that. I made sure all the links worked. This led to the careers flyer, everything like that. So All the newsletters, I did that, but I will mention that, yeah, because these had such clear CTAs to what they were leading to, I just made sure that it led exactly to what it said it was leading to. Okay. So one thing I did notice, so I like the simple layout of this newsletter, and I think that you could easily keep this simple layout if you wanted to. Although when I looked at your website, when Georgia and I looked at the branding of your website, we both noticed that the website had a lot more branding than what was reflected in the newsletters. So the website it showed a lot more of that specific brand style. It showed more colors, more images, etc. So your website showed that cohesive brand style, but that wasn't reflected in the newsletter itself. Not a bad thing at all, just more something that we noticed where the newsletter had a very simple layout, and then the website, not that the website wasn't simple, but the website showed a lot more of that brand voice than the newsletter did. So if you notice that juxtaposition, you can see that if you want to add maybe a little bit more of those brand colors or more of those images, it really is up to you. It's just that noticing that you do have that strong brand voice on your website and it's not as reflected in the newsletter. And then also a suggestion to include a header here that's from Georgia. So we have different ways to include headers. If you look at the drag and drop editor, there's different header options. You can have a header here that just has links to your website, that has just kind of important links. It can kind of go very well into this simple layout. It can just be almost like a bar menu up here. But there's different layout header options as well. So if you just have a look at that, just a simple suggestion to add a little something else here other than just the logo. But otherwise, great newsletter. Again, the simplicity of it is really nice. There's no need to add more things. These are suggestions if you want to play around with design and kind of bring more of that branding into your newsletter. There is a lot of room for that. Okay, we are going to wrap up. Okay, thank you, everyone. That is basically it for today. So as I mentioned, we did receive more newsletter submissions. I cannot go through all of them in this session, but I did not go through the newsletter in this live audit, you still will receive your notes. Like I said, we took notes on all of the campaigns, so you'll still receive those notes if you haven't already received them. Probably by the end of today, you'll receive those notes. But I do appreciate everyone that submitted their newsletter for audit. I think this is a good thing that we can do to just give that live feedback. As I mentioned, we do look over these newsletters. I did pass them over to our email marketing expert in-house in MailerLite, so to get those tips. So this is a good way to just share those ideas more on a personal level and also what can be universal for everyone. So thank you again for joining. If you want to know more about our events, we have on our website all of the upcoming events as well as in the MailerLite community. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining today. We will see you in the next one. Bye.